In 1926, a fifth-floor apartment in Harlem. A red bulb glows in the hallway while fried pork chops and corn whiskey drift through the stairwell. The piano pounds so hard the floorboards shake beneath 40 people packed into a room built for 6. A quarter changes hands at the door. Another drops into the cigar box beside the kitchen table. By midnight, the rent is covered. By sunrise, the music fades, and another family keeps its home one more month. These are 20 forgotten rules that kept Harlem alive during the housing crisis, and every one of them was built from community instead of wealth. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 20. The 25-cent door. A quarter at the door could cover a family's rent. Neighbors paid admission so strangers would not lose their home. Hosts charged 25 cents at the apartment door. They rolled back the carpet, dimmed the lights, and seated the musician. A quarter pressed into a woman's palm at the doorframe. A cigar box on the hall table filled with nickels and dimes. That admission, combined with plates of food and glasses of bootleg gin, could generate $50 to $100 in a single night. More than enough for the month's rent. 25 cents in 1926 is roughly $4.50 today. That is what it cost to save a family. The door was not a transaction. It was a covenant. You walked in, you paid, and you kept a stranger in their home one more month. Number 19. The rent party ticket. Bright-colored tickets disguised as social invitations quietly funded rent payments across Harlem apartments during the housing crisis. Hosts printed small, bright-colored cards with quirky rhymes and code words. The cards never once called it a rent party. They enlisted a man known as the Wayside Printer, a middle-aged white man who walked Harlem streets with a portable press on a cart. Small cards, pink, blue, yellow, the size of a playing card. The wording always used terms like social party, parlor social, or too terrible party. Never rent party. The poet Langston Hughes collected these tickets for decades. Those cards now sit in the Yale Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library under glass. A woman who could not write her own name paid a man with a portable press to print poetry so her family could keep a roof. Number 18. The Lone Piano Man. One pianist played loud enough for crowded apartments, creating Harlem Stride because families could not afford full jazz bands. Stride piano emerged because families could only afford to hire one musician. One man had to sound like a full band. The left hand performed rhythmic chords while the right hand played blues melodies and riffs so fast the keys blurred. The style was called Harlem Stride, made famous by James P. Johnson, Fats Waller, and Willie the Lion Smith. One man, one upright piano. 60 bodies in a room the size of a modern studio apartment. No amplifier, no microphone. Just a man making a piano sound like a 5-piece band because the host could only pay for one. Some of these men played 3 or 4 parties in a single night, walking block to block with aching hands and a pocket full of dollar bills. A style of music that changed the world was born because a family was too broke to hire a band. Number 17. The furniture clearance. Families emptied entire apartments every weekend, transforming cramped living rooms into dance halls to survive another month financially. Every piece of furniture was pulled out of the front rooms, rugs rolled up, colored bulbs fitted into the sockets, beds pushed into the back hallway, dressers stacked in the bedroom, a kitchen table turned on its side, the bare floor swept clean. Hosts sometimes rented folding chairs from a local undertaker, chairs borrowed from the man who buried the dead. That detail alone tells you how thin the line was. A family disassembled its home every Saturday night so it could afford to keep it. That is not a party. That is an act of will. Number 16. The kitchen table economy. Women sold Southern food from tiny kitchens, turning fried chicken and collard greens into emergency rent money overnight. Hosts cooked massive quantities of Southern food and sold it by the plate, 10 cents, 15 cents, a quarter if there was ham. Hoppin' John, fried chicken, chitterlings, collard greens, potato salad, sweet potato pone. A woman frying chicken in a cast iron skillet in a kitchen the size of a closet. Pig's feet simmering since Thursday. Cornbread still warm when it hit the plate. For people 600 miles north of the place they were born, a plate of chitlins in a Harlem kitchen was the closest thing to the life they had left behind. She fed 100 strangers out of a kitchen with one burner and a sink that dripped. She was not running a restaurant. She was running a rescue operation that smelled like Sunday dinner. 5 rules in. Not one required a license, a permit, or a loan. A quarter at the door. Tickets from a portable press. A piano man who played until his fingers ached. A kitchen that became a restaurant. The entire economy fit between the front door and the fire escape. Number 15. The bootleg bar. Bathtub gin and homemade whiskey funded apartments throughout Prohibition, with mason jars replacing licensed bars across Harlem nights. A quarter pint called a shorty went for a dime. Prohibition was the law of the land, and homemade liquor was offered in open defiance. The corn whiskey was called King Kong because it knocked you sideways. A full pint cost 50 cents. No one checked identification. No one asked your name. The apartment was the speakeasy. The host was the bartender, and if a cop came knocking, there was always a back window and a fire escape. They were already living outside the protection of the law by the simple fact of existing. Selling corn whiskey in a mason jar was the least of it. Number 14. The Saturday night rule. Saturday parties matched factory paydays, giving workers exactly one weekend night to raise rent before Monday morning arrived. Parties were held on Saturdays. That was payday for most laborers. The music started at 10 and lasted until dawn. A man walked home from the rail yard or the loading dock with a small envelope in his front pocket. Wages in cash. He had walked past the landlord's payment box that morning. He knew what was owed. Saturday night was the only window. By the time the sun came up over Lenox Avenue, the cigar box held enough to survive the first. The money came in on Saturday. The rent was due on Monday. The party was the bridge between those 2 days. There was no margin for error and no second chance if the night fell short. Number 13. The Thursday night party. Domestic workers hosted Thursday gatherings because it was often their only free evening after exhausting household labor shifts. Although rent parties happened every night of the week, Thursday was especially popular among domestic workers across Harlem. Black women who cooked, cleaned, and raised other people's children 6 days a week in white households on Park Avenue. Thursday was their one night. They came home to Harlem. They came home to the music. Many of them were the very ones organizing the parties. For these women, hosting was a form of entrepreneurship that gave them not just rent money, but independence and standing in the community. She spent the week invisible in someone else's house. Thursday night, she danced in her own. Number 12. The home defense officer. Large men guarded apartment entrances, protecting guests from thieves, gamblers, and police interference throughout crowded rent party nights. Some hosts hired what they called a home defense officer to watch the door and break up trouble immediately. Not a bouncer. A home defense officer was a large man stationed at the apartment entrance. He knew who belonged and who did not. He could spot a pickpocket by the way the man moved through a crowd. They were professional gamblers, confidence men, and crooks looking for an accomplice. The home defense officer kept them out or put them down. The community policed itself because nobody else was going to. He was the law inside that apartment. Outside the door, there was no law that protected them. Number 11. The colored light bulb in the window. Colored bulbs silently advertised underground parties, guiding neighbors upstairs without alerting outsiders or suspicious authorities watching nearby streets. A red, blue, or pink light bulb screwed into a window socket signaled a rent party happening upstairs. You walked down Lenox Avenue on a Saturday night and you looked up. An apartment with a colored light in the window and the sound of piano music would draw you in off the street. You did not always need the ticket. The light told you. If you did not know the signal, you were not invited. The light was visible from the sidewalk, but invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. An entire communication system built from a 5-cent light bulb and a silent agreement that nobody would explain it to outsiders. 10 rules. A full economy running on nothing but ingenuity. A door charge, a kitchen, a bar, a musician, a bouncer, a signal system, a printing network, a schedule calibrated to pay cycles. All of it organized by people who had been told they were not organized. Harlem built a parallel world inside its own apartments. Number 10. The cutting contest. Jazz legends battled piano to piano inside crowded apartments, building reputations through musical competition before roaring neighborhood audiences overnight. Rent parties became the stage for cutting contests where pianists competed by trying to outplay one another in public. Fats Waller, James P. Johnson, and Willie the Lion Smith regularly made the rounds. One man played until the crowd roared. Then another man sat down and tried to play something better. The crowd decided who won. No judges, no trophy, just the room. If you won, you played the next party. If you lost, you sat down and listened. Reputations were built and destroyed between midnight and dawn. The greatest jazz musicians in American history auditioned for their careers in someone's living room. The audience was neighbors trying to make rent. Number 9. The dance floor that changed American dance. Crowded apartments forced creative movement styles that later evolved into swing dancing and the famous Lindy Hop nationwide. Many jazz-era social dances began inside crowded rent party apartments where improvisation replaced formal ballroom movement entirely. Formal dancing was impossible, not enough room. So they invented something that fit: quick feet, close bodies, a swing of the hip in 2 square feet of bare floor. These were dances born from compression, not choreography. The movements were later refined in the great dance halls of Harlem. The Savoy Ballroom, which opened in 1926, became the birthplace of the Lindy Hop. But the raw energy that fed the Savoy's dance floor came from the same community that packed those Saturday night apartments. The culture moved from the living room to the ballroom, and from there it conquered the world. Number 8. The vocabulary of the drink. Bootleg liquor developed its own slang, prices, and rituals, forming a hidden language around survival and celebration together. The bootleg liquor served at rent parties had its own names, prices, measurements, and underground social customs. A shorty warmed your chest without draining your paycheck. King Kong whiskey could knock a man sideways instantly. Some gin tasted smooth enough to become dangerous quickly. Other bottles burned like kerosene from the first sip. Families traded gin recipes like treasured Southern cooking traditions. Lemon peel, juniper berries, sugar, and desperation mixed together in hidden kitchens throughout Harlem apartment blocks. The mason jar became both a drinking glass and a survival tool at the exact same time. Guests learned quickly which apartments sold safe liquor and which ones sent people stumbling into the street. Every dime spent at the bar traveled directly towards somebody's rent envelope waiting on the kitchen table. The liquor was illegal, but eviction frightened people far more than the police ever could. They built a full vocabulary around the act of surviving. That is what a culture does when it has no institutions to speak for it. It makes its own language. Number 7. The 12-party block. Entire apartment blocks hosted simultaneous parties, competing through better musicians, stronger drinks, and hotter Southern food plates each night. As many as 12 rent parties on one Harlem block could happen simultaneously on busy Saturday evenings. Music spilled from windows across entire Harlem blocks nightly. Multiple piano players competed through thin apartment walls at the same time. Different buildings became famous for whiskey, fish, or cornbread. Bright-colored bulbs attracted guests walking below on Lenox Avenue. Children lying awake in nearby apartments memorized the sound of stride piano before they could even read properly. The parties transformed ordinary apartment blocks into whole nighttime economies running without permits or outside investment. Competition pushed hosts to improve everything from the musicians to the quality of the potato salad plates. By dawn, the sidewalks were crowded with exhausted workers laughing their way home as the city slowly woke up. For one night every week, Harlem turned survival into an industry powered entirely by its own people. When people call the rent party a party, they misunderstand what they are describing. It was an industry. Number 6. The court that could not stop it. A New York court refused to shut parties down, proving Harlem's underground housing economy had become impossible to eliminate. A woman complained about the noise from a rent party below her apartment and lost the court case. Not the host, the complainant. A court of law in New York looked at this situation and decided the party was going to win. The judge did not shut it down. He told the woman downstairs to find another apartment. There is something here that goes past economics. These people did not just throw parties. They built a civilization inside their own walls. They had infrastructure, they had culture, they had art forms that did not exist before they existed. No grant, no government program, no permission from anyone. Just the rent, the first of the month, and the decision to face it together. Today in America, the average renter spends 30% of gross income on housing. In cities like New York, that number can push past 50%. The housing crisis is not new. Harlem faced it 100 years ago. The difference is that Harlem answered it with a 25-cent door and a cast-iron skillet. Number 5. The card table in the back room. Backroom card games generated additional rent money where trust and strategy mattered more than luck or gambling itself. Many rent parties included folding card tables where guests played bid whist while the house collected small percentages. 4 chairs, a deck of worn bicycle playing cards, a nickel ante, sometimes a dime. Partners sat across from each other, the slap of a trump card on bare wood, smoke drifting above the lamp. The house skimmed a small percentage from each pot, more money for the rent box. Some nights, the back room brought in almost as much as the front door. In the back room, where the music was lower and the smoke was thicker, men and women played a game that required trust and a partner who could read your eyes without a word. That is not gambling. That is relationship. Number 4. Southern food as Northern currency. Southern recipes carried north during migration, becoming emotional lifelines and economic tools for homesick Harlem residents struggling financially. The food served at rent parties came directly from Southern traditions carried north during the Great Migration period. The rent party tradition itself was rooted in customs from black communities down south. Saturday night fish fries, parlor socials, and church suppers supplied dishes like fried catfish, collard greens cooked in fatback, and sweet potato pone. Recipes came from Georgia, the Carolinas, and Alabama. No measurements were written down, just a handful of this and a pinch of that. Those plates were sold for 10 cents each, 700 miles from the place where the recipe was first learned. A plate of food at a rent party was never just a plate of food. It was proof that where you came from still mattered. It was memory you could hold in your hands. Number 3. The landlord who never knew. Landlords collected rent without understanding that entire neighborhoods secretly financed apartments through parties, food, music, and underground cash economies. The entire rent party system operated in an invisible way, while landlords unknowingly accepted money raised through underground community networks. That 25-cent admission, combined with food and liquor profits, created a circular cash economy that kept every dollar flowing within the community. The landlord sent a collector on Monday morning. The tenant opened the door, counted out the bills, and closed it again. The invisible economy of Harlem was a closed loop. The money came from 40 neighbors on Saturday night. It left through one man's hand on Monday morning. And the man who took it never once understood the machinery that produced it. Number 2. The poet at the party. Langston Hughes preserved rent party invitations because Harlem's crowded apartments inspired more truth than elite literary circles ever could. He kept those little printed cards even as he traveled through the Soviet Union, Haiti, and Japan. And he carried them until he finally settled into his own home on East 127th Street in 1947. He was a poet in the corner of someone's apartment at 2 in the morning, not performing, but listening. The greatest poet of the Harlem Renaissance found his material not in a lecture hall, but in a living room with a plate of fish and a glass of King Kong in his hand. The party did not need the poet, but the poet needed the party. Every one of these rules came from the same place: necessity, not inspiration. The need to make rent by Monday with whatever came in on Saturday, in a city that charged them double for half the space. They did not romanticize what they were doing. They survived it. Number 1. The unwritten rule. If a neighbor faced eviction, the entire block organized a party because survival depended on protecting each other collectively. The deepest rule of the rent party was simple. If your neighbor could not pay rent, everyone helped. Duke Ellington recalled that rent parties grew out of parlor socials and church suppers held to raise funds for church needs. Before Harlem, it was the church supper in the rural South. A family in trouble. A collection passed. No paperwork, no application. Just a knock on the door and $1 folded inside a hymnal. In Harlem, the church supper became the rent party. The principle never changed. You do not let your neighbor lose their home. You clear the furniture. You borrow chairs from the undertaker. You screw in the red light bulb. You fry the fish. You open the door at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. And by morning, the rent is paid, not yours, theirs. 20 rules. Not one required a bank, a permit, or anyone's approval. Just a piano, a skillet, a red light bulb, and neighbors refusing to let each other fall. 100 years later, the buildings have changed, but the math has not. And somewhere right now, in a city where the rent is still too high and the wages are still too low, someone is knocking on a neighbor's door, not to borrow something, to offer it. If you want more forgotten wisdom from the generations who came before us, the next video is waiting for you right now.